Hi there, everybody. Daniel from Concept 101 here. Today, I'm bringing you a very quick tutorial, which is to do with my kind of speedy and efficient method for doing black and white thumbnails in Blender. Black and white thumbnails, obviously, something that a lot of concept artists show in their portfolios, and they can be quite tricky to do. So, this is how I personally approach it. Now, this does involve Blender. In terms of things I am going to cover, I'm going to talk very briefly about camera placement and some of the basics of that, and then also how you take this stuff into Photoshop to make fun of kind of thumbnails, essentially. What I won't be covering is things like painting technique. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. Anyway, when might you be doing thumbnails? Well, thumbnails are a really kind of basic part of the concept art process. It's something I've had to do for films and video games in the past, and I find them to be a really quick and efficient way to kind of start conversations with directors or game leads. So this technique, like I said, mainly involves Blender, and it really doesn't require any insane skills in the program. It's a very basic process that I've put through for myself, really, to make sure that it's as kind of simplistic as possible, because a thumbnail ultimately needs to be simplistic to get the right idea across. So as you can see here, I've built a basic little set for myself, nothing too complicated. All this geometry is super basic. I've got my little character here, which is something I built a while ago, and I've kind of just set up this, like I said, basic set, which I can move my cameras around to find some compositions. So let's start with that. So I'm going to go into my active camera here, and you can see I've got some horrible zoomed out view. We're using an anamorphic lens, so 2350 by 1000, which is kind of like a standard film screen size. And we're just going to start moving around and trying to find some nice camera placements. Now, in terms of a few basic things to think about when you're placing your camera, one really easy thing to always do is to think about your thirds and your center line. So we have our two kind of main composition focal points, the big crystal tower in the center here, and our character. And, if you want to check those points, I know from experience that maybe placing these two things here is going to be roughly on the 2/3. So maybe this starts to look good as a composition. But if you want to check this stuff, select your camera here, move down to your object data properties for the camera here, go down from viewport display into composition guides, and then you can click on thirds, for example. Yeah, pretty close to see, actual guidelines for where your stuff needs to be. So you could put a camera here, for example, or we could switch it to the center line so we know where the center of the frame is, and then we can make sure that, at least one of our elements is in the center of frame to create a nice dramatic effect. Something else to consider when you're choosing your cameras is focal length. So this is a really essential kind of part of camera choice because different focal lengths give different effects. So right now we're using a 21mm focal length. You can find all of this stuff again in the object data properties for your camera in Blender. If we change this, for example, to a 35, we're going to kind of crop in a lot more. We're going to be seeing far less of the environment because it's a much kind of tighter lens. We can go even tighter into, for example, a 55, right? And we're going to see even less of the overall environment. We could even go into a 105 to get very, very close. Kind of an almost over the shoulder shot here. Now, different camera focal lengths really kind of evoke different feelings. 105, because it's so, I guess, it flattens the image a lot. It can create a nice sense of, I suppose, composition, but it's not going to create a lot of depth. It can also, if we move our camera over here and we hide it behind a pillar or something, maybe it's going to give you that effect of somebody snooping on this dude with like a long lens camera, some kind of detective or something. And again, if we go to 21, this is a lot more dynamic. We're seeing a lot more of the environment, a lot more depth. We can put that really close to the character, for example, to really get a sense of the scale of this environment. Another thing to consider when you're playing with your cameras is the cinematic versus production value of the image. So this is something that I haven't seen discussed that much, but I just wanted to bring it up quickly in this tutorial to say that, there's two things to consider when you're making an image. Number one, is the image cool and cinematic? So if we have a, let's get a 55mm here, for this 55, this could be a very cool and cinematic shot if we have nice lighting, right? We're behind our main character, he's in the center of frame, could be walking towards this, big epic focal point, and then the camera is going to pan up, and we're going to get a really great sense of scale. However, this doesn't show off the environment. And I think that's where this idea of production value comes in. So sometimes when we're making concept art, part of the reason we're making it is not only to create a cool looking image, but to also provide a lot of value to the director or production designer or environment team. So sometimes we have to try and balance these things. So for example, a larger kind of like zoomed out image like this using a 21mm focal length is going to show way more of the environment, and it's going to be way more useful to somebody who needs to build this as an actual physical set. So that's also something that you might want to consider is like, yeah, how much of this environment do I really want to show? How much of it do I have to show? And how cinematic do you want to go? So you've chosen your camera length. I have one that's already pre-baked in right here. So I think it's quite a nice one. We've got both of our characters both of our focal points kind of in the central third-ish. Everything's framed nicely. We've got some good headroom above our crystal here. So now what do we do? Well, what I like to do, again, and this is all in the aim of simplicity, is I like to go into a little render engine called Workbench. So you can find this by going into your Render Properties tab, clicking on Render Engine, and switching to Workbench over here. You're going to start getting this view, hopefully, when you load it up. Then we're going to go down into Lighting, down here, and we're going to go from Studio to Flat. Then we're going to switch to our viewport shading, so we can actually see this stuff happening. So now this is what we're looking like. I'm going to go down into Options down here. And I'm going to click on Shadow, which gives us this cool shadow effect. And then I'm going to turn this the whole way up to 1. And we're going to get this kind of very, very sharp black and white effect, which is looking cool already. Then we're going to go into Shadow Shift and make sure that this is set to 0. And we're going to look at Shadow Focus and make sure that this is set to 1. If you soften this down, you're going to get a lot kind of more of a diffuse look where it's going to show you like more of the actual faceting of the light. If it's turned up, you're just going to get this pure black and white read, which I think is really cool and effective. And then to move your light direction around, you just need to select this little sphere here on the right and just move it. So as you can see, this is really, really basic. And I think what you need to consider when you're using this tool is, a thumbnail should read quickly and effectively and very easily. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. So when you're moving your light around, if we put it here, for example, we're not going to get a clear value read from this composition, right? Our main character is totally blown out by the light. He's up against a really bright background as well. The crystal, at least, is kind of separated, but we're not getting any form read over this. So it's not really an ideal lighting situation. So what we want is something that shows some form, allows for simultaneous contrast around a focal point, and doesn't kind of ruin the sense of depth in the image. So I'm thinking of something probably a little bit more to the right here, something like this. So as you can see, we're getting a lot more kind of simultaneous contrast on our character here. The left side of him is kind of in shadow, while the piece of crystal he's sitting against is much brighter. The bright side of him is against a darker background. And our crystal, hopefully once we pop this out at the end in Photoshop, is going to have a nice shadow and light side. So I encourage you to play around with this. It's a really effective tool, not only for kind of daylight situations, but also for even kind of internally lit things. If you want to do this with an interior scene, just cut a hole in the ceiling where you want the light to be, and you're going to be done. You can also get a pretty similar effect in Eevee, which I'm just going to show you now. Personally, I don't like to use Eevee. I prefer to use Workbench because, like I said, it's simpler and it's like kind of less steps. But in Eevee, if you select your sun and you change it so that the strength is, let's say, like 7 or 8, so a little bit brighter, then we're going to change our angle here to 0 so that we're getting less, the diffusion essentially. So the higher the angle is, the more it's diffused. So we're going to set it to 0. And then we really need to make sure that our shadow settings are set to kind of higher accuracy. So you want to make sure that your cube size and cascade size is in the 4000s, and then that you have high bit depth on and light threshold quite low. And that should kind of give you a good effect. Again, it's not quite as effective in my opinion as the other one. I think Workbench is cooler, but yeah, if you want to use Eevee, you can do it. And this does allow you to set up extra lights rather than just one. So we've got, let's just go back to Workbench for a second. We've got kind of our vague lighting setup here that we kind of like. What are we going to do now? Well, the next thing to do is to get a mist pass. So in Workbench, you can't get a mist pass, unfortunately. So we have to go back to Eevee, and we're going to go up to here into Combined, and to be able to view our mist pass, we're going to click on Combined and go to Data Mist. So now we're getting this view. To actually make the mist pass editable, what you have to do is go into your View Layer Properties, go to Passes, Data, and turn on Mist. And now in the World Properties tab, you're going to have a new kind of tab here called Mist Pass. So when you open it, it's going to look something like this probably. And what we want to do is adjust these for maximum kind of depth and readability. So if I start turning this on, you can see that we're starting to, again, get like more kind of read from this back area. As we go further and further, it's turning all of this kind of into a separation, it's separating it out. Now we don't want it to be this separated because this kind of blocks all of this area into one group. So now we're going to change our depth, and we're just going to kind of adjust these two together until we get something that looks a little bit like this, I suppose. Maybe a little bit less. Yeah, something like this. So now you can clearly see the depth and the fall off using this mist pass. This is going to be a really effective tool to take into Photoshop. So all you have to do from this point is render your mist pass and render your workbench pass, and then you're going to take them both into Photoshop, and I'll see you there in just a second. Okay, so you've taken out your two renders. So this is our workbench render, and this is our mist render. And now you're in Photoshop, you've stuck them on two layers together here. How do you proceed? Well, the first thing to do is to take your mist pass, make sure that it is above your workbench layer, and set it to lighten. So automatically you can see how much this transforms the scene. We have kind of a clear background now. We have some of these elements like this big kind of black shadow section of this main crystal being blocked out and having some contrast against it. And we're going to want to just adjust this layer on the opacity until we get kind of the desired effect. So I'm going to put this down to about like 50%. So again, you can start to see that this is really helping, with the sense of depth. So as you can see, I've prepared one of these earlier. I've taken my lighten mist pass and my main kind of workbench pass here. I've combined them together. And then this is just my little layer stack of things that I would do over the top. So first of all, I want to apply some kind of gradients to just pop out some of these elements. So to give off that sense of kind of like light bounce from this really strong kind of white floor, which is probably going to be like sand or desert dirt or something, we're just going to have some bounce light coming off. So that's going to help as well break out some of these background elements and separate them from these foreground pieces. Next, I'm just going to put in a basic sky. So one thing that will really help you do that is creating a separate kind of mask. You can do this from your lighten layer just by selecting the background. Very easy to do, and it means that you have a mask that you can reuse for the rest of the image. So I'm going to just put in a basic sky. Then we're going to proceed into kind of adding in some more elements. So you can see here I've changed some of the shadows on the left side. I took out this big crystal on the right side and cut it down to something a little bit smaller. And I've kind of adjusted my values again. And then with the final pass, you can see I've just, again, adjusted the values. I've added in some extra faceting. I've done a little bit of smudging here and there, put in some sci-fi moons in the sky, and yeah, just finessed the sky a tiny bit. Overall, going from, just to go back, going from this to this, it only takes maybe 15 minutes max. Like I said, this is a really effective way to get your idea out there. As you can see, this works 100% as a thumbnail read. This is the kind of thing, it's clean, right? And even better, it's something that you can then take if the director likes, and you can directly start working into the scene again in 3D. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you wanted to finesse this further, you would probably take a kind of pass to it where you break up some of these 3D edges with a nice textural brush and start adding in a little bit more personality maybe into this image. But again, whether you're doing that with brush strokes or photo bash is totally up to you, and it's just going to add that kind of final layer of polish that you want. So yeah, that's it. I hope this has been helpful. I'm definitely hoping to see some people using this technique. Again, like I said, it's something that I use all the time. I find it super helpful, and I hope you find it helpful as well. Very quick and easy, and it's going to take you, maybe an hour or two to smash out like 10 of these. Maybe not 10, maybe 4. 10 might be a little bit overambitious. But overall, like I said, very effective, very quick to do, and very, very easy. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this tutorial and you found it useful. If you have found it useful, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want more kind of like fun information, go check out our podcast, or even consider coming to the Concept 101 event, which is being held in August this year. If you do use this technique, feel free to tag us online. We'd love to see how you used it and what you used it for. So best of luck with everything on your art journey, and hopefully talk to you all soon. Bye. Thank you, guys.